It started out like any normal day. I went out with my mum that morning to the Palms Shopping Centre in Shirley. And yeah, I mean, like any normal day, like we just did some shopping. Nothing felt out of the ordinary. And we drove home. At the time, I was living at my mum and my stepdad's house and in the sleep out the back. And I put my shopping down in the sleep out and I started walking back towards the house. I distinctly remember I went to go open the screen door to the back of the house, and the ground just went. Um, the yeah, just the most violent shaking that you can never imagine. I lost my footing on the steps, and it kind of swung me into the fence a little bit that the door was backing onto. It felt like it went on for a long time, and we lived in a cul-de-sac near the primary school where my little brother and sister went, and I remember distinctly hearing the screams of the kids, and amongst the sound of it's really hard to describe. It's just like thunder and breaking glass and concrete shattering, and I remember when I finally got my footing, it was still shaking at this point. And I remember looking out across the road above the fence, and it just looked like waves in the ground. Anyway, it went on for a long time, and then it stopped, and then that turned into smaller aftershocks, and quickly ran in and checked on mum, and uh, everything was okay. Obviously, the power and all that was out at this point, and there was no phones working or anything. Mum went and got my little brother and sister from the school, and I kind of went out onto the street to have a look around, and just seeing the faces of terrified parents running towards the school. Those are the kinds of things that stuck with me for a long time. Just the scream of those kids, and um, the look on the parents' faces, and so 15 years ago, the world saw the images from Christchurch, and it's known as the 2011 Christchurch earthquakes, and it's kind of as if it was a single moment in time. And what a lot of people don't realize, once the cameras go away, it doesn't stop. For those of us that called it home at the time, it wasn't just one quake. It was years of the ground moving, and thousands and thousands of aftershocks, and it didn't actually start on that day. It all started on the early morning on the 4th of September 2010, and you've probably heard some of my guests talk about this already on the podcast, but growing up in Christchurch, well, anywhere in New Zealand, really, a lot of people would have remembered the ads on TV about what to do in an earthquake, and I remember for many years reading, that the Alpine Fault was due to go and due to have a big earthquake, and being in New Zealand, you're part of the Ring of Fire. We would do earthquake drills in the school. Get under the desk and under door frames and all kinds of stuff like that. And you would grow up and have small earthquakes, magnitude 3 or 4. I can remember a few when I was little that would, wake me up or whatever. Most of the time you don't really feel them. But that particular morning in September, on the 4th of September 2010, that particular morning I remember, I was really early. I woke up. I wasn't at my house that night. I was at a friend's place, and their place kind of backed onto a railway line. The railway line was about a block away, and the coal trains would come through or whatever. And so it started off as this little rumble in the distance. I thought, oh, well, hang on a minute, that's probably a train or something like that. Got louder, and I was like, okay, this is weird. And then, super violent shaking. That just seemed to go on for a long time. And even though you do all those practice drills in school and that growing up, nothing prepares you for shaking like that. You're in fight or flight mode, but you freeze for a minute. These quakes last for a good minute and a half, and it feels like a long time. It feels a lot longer than that. And I mean, I don't even know, probably a good 15, 20 seconds in, I realized it was a quake, and my friend got a cut on her face. Something had fallen off her windowsill. And I just remember, shouting to get up and get to the door, but by then it was kind of starting to stop anyway. And yeah, so that was a magnitude 7.1 earthquake, and that was sort of west of Christchurch out near Darfield, and that one was quite deep. It was still violent, but it certainly, probably didn't feel like a 7.1 really. But I remember being out driving that day. Friends of ours had what they call liquefaction come out of the ground. It's this real like cementy sort of texture or mixture that comes out of the ground after a quake, and we started driving, and one, to get my friend's cheek stitched up, but number two, uh, to start helping some friends out that had been flooded out by this liquefaction stuff. And so we're driving into the city from Rangiora, and seeing massive cracks in the ground, and it was unbelievable to see that. And the railway tracks had zigzags all through them, and quite crazy, really. But no buildings came down or anything like that. I don't think anyone was hurt too badly or anything like that. No one died. So that was a very different event, but that kicked off a sequence of more than 7,000 earthquakes across Canterbury. And again, once the television cameras go away, it doesn't stop. We're talking thousands of quakes. And the next big significant one after that was actually Boxing Day in 2010. We had a swarm of more than 30 quite shallow earthquakes in the city, up to about 4.9 magnitude from what I found online, cutting power, damaging shop fronts. I worked in a bar at the time, and just, bottles and shit smashed everywhere. All that stuff, you're constantly cleaning up. You just get used to it. And certainly from that moment on, again, you're having, dozens of aftershocks every day, and sleep becomes hard, and you start living on this like adrenaline rush. Essentially, you're always on alert. A truck or a bus goes past, and your house shakes a little, and you're like, "Oh, is this another one?" You're just constantly having this adrenaline rush. But yeah, that one in February, that was just such a different ball game, really. The violence of it, it happened at lunchtime as well, and a lot of people got hurt, a lot of people died, and the phones were down for a long time, like well over 24 hours. Power was gone for months. Sewage was gone for months. There was pockets of it that you could, sort of find refuge with. And yeah, really strange time. And I remember, we had a little transistor radio, and managed to get the news on, and slowly but surely news started filtering through that people were being pulled from rubble in the city. And from a personal point of view, I had my brother and friends that worked in the city, and we couldn't get through to them. We had no idea how anyone was, what was going on in there. And then with the earthquake, the Avon riverbed kind of got pushed up, and we lived in Avondale at the time, and quickly, as the tide was coming in, the area started flooding. And so we made the decision to leave. And as we sort of drove out, the water was coming up to the bonnet of the car pretty quick. And, the bridges were destroyed. There were cars and sinkholes, and in the river, it was, very, very tricky to get out, very slow process to get out with, I was just in a little car with my dog, and family went in another car. Anyway, I got out to my grandparents, and pretty much just spent the next 3 days attached to the news. And unfortunately, well over 180 people died in that earthquake. In fact, I think it's the worst natural disaster in the history of the country. So, it's left a big legacy with Christchurch. The whole CBD and sort of eastern suburbs were well and truly leveled out. If you look at Google Images and stuff, you'll see, a lot of the eastern side of the city is all sort of parkland, essentially, that they can't build on at the moment. But yeah, the damage, it wasn't just, lives and, buildings coming down and liquefaction. Like, it went well beyond that. Studies in Christchurch talk about intense fear, stress, anxiety, hypervigilance, sleeplessness, cognitive fog, and the sheer exhaustion being the new normal after the earthquakes. That next year, after roadworks everywhere, you couldn't go into the city. You're constantly cleaning up. You're constantly dealing with aftershocks, and everyone was doing it really tough and didn't have power, sewage. Having to get bottles of water from somewhere and use portaloos and use torchlight and all kinds. It was really tough for a lot of people there. And I remember, a good 12 months on reading, it's going to take a good 15, 20 years to rebuild the city. And, I think for a lot of people at that time, it didn't feel like it was worth it. It didn't feel like it was worth staying. So, yeah, a lot of people, including myself, decided to leave the city. But I remember thinking at the time, there were lots of bits of art and stuff popping up in 2012, and the Container Mall came along not long later in Cashel Street, and things like that. And I just knew that with the creative people that they had there, that they were going to make the city a great place, and that Christchurch had a wonderful opportunity to turn itself into a city of the future and probably the best city in the country. It was always going to be a slow process because there was kind of the second disaster, really, because of all the events that we had. And GPs and researchers talk about this, patients being worn down, not just by the shaking, but by years of arguing over insurance claims, living in cracked houses, not knowing if their street would be red zoned. EQC pretty much ran out of money. And secondary stresses like insurance and housing issues were just major drivers of anxiety and ongoing stress. It was a really tough time, and it made also rebuilding really, really, really slow. And this stuff just took years. But yeah, the mental anguish as well. Like I remember, friends and family coming over here to Melbourne, a few years afterwards, and feeling really anxious around tall buildings, or even going into tall buildings, and being around a lot of people and things like that, just because of the sheer terror of what happened on those days. But yeah, look, I paint a really ugly picture, and it was a really devastating time, and the effects are still going to be felt for many years to come, obviously. And here we are, 15 years later. But alongside that, there was massive community spirit as well. University students and all kinds of people just turning up with boots and shovels and wheelbarrows and clearing the mud and liquefaction for neighbours, and getting GP clinics and cafes and restaurants back on their feet. It just felt like people weren't going to wait for it to happen. They weren't going to wait for bureaucracy. They were going to get back on their feet. Christchurch rolled out a transitional city program to support temporary projects that helped with healing and a sense of place and keeping businesses going. And while the permanent rebuild was, there was a lot of arguing over the rebuild. Things like, where do we build a stadium, or how do we rebuild the cathedral, and what should the city look like, and just a lot of crazy stuff going on in the backgrounds that I probably don't even know half of. But from that came catalysts like gap filler and greening the rubble, turning vacant lots into pop-up parks and dance floors and outdoor cinemas and art galleries, hundreds of creative community projects that really livened the city and brought some character back to the place. But also grieve as well. Even if you didn't lose a loved one, you lost a sense of self because you lost all your childhood landmarks. And I know I've spoken about this before, and I know a lot of people that I've had on this podcast have spoken about it before, but you're grieving a significant part of your life, and you're grieving losing a place, because Christchurch wasn't Christchurch anymore. It really changed. It was reduced to rubble. But yeah, there was a Share an Idea campaign, which invited the public to imagine a better central city. and more than 100,000 ideas from what I've read poured in. Calls for a greener, more walkable city, a people-focused Christchurch that has heavily influenced what has been built since. I went back last in 2023, and it really just blew my mind what they've done there. The wonderful parklands and the city, the art installations, the city itself, the new buildings, the new motorways, like just, incredible what they've done there. But now fast forward to today, and I kind of feel like there's a real beacon of recovery, if you will. And there's probably a lot of ratepayers there that don't agree, but I think this was always going to be significant. And that is the new One New Zealand Stadium in Christchurch that's about to open. It's finally a fully covered stadium in the city to protect the fans from those cold, wet, icy nights, and a 30,000 plus seat arena in the heart of the city, placing the old Jade Stadium, Lancaster Park, which was an amazing stadium as well. But this is what the city always needed, and I felt once this new stadium was built, that would really signal that the city's back, it's on its feet, and ready to be one of the best cities in the world. It's one of the last of the major post-earthquake anchor projects. And yeah, it's Christchurch is just a remarkable comeback story. So yeah, for One New Zealand Stadium, it sits on land once synonymous with loss. It's a place where everyone from all around the world can get together in the heart of the city. It's a place for rugby league, for concerts, for kids who grew up with road cones and cordons around their houses to see their heroes under the roof. And it stands on top of, thousands and thousands of aftershocks, thousands of insurance meetings, and countless quiet acts of kindness. It really is the beacon of hope for the city. My hometown, it'll always carry its scars, and I'll carry them in me too. But just to look at the city and what it's taught us about grief, what it's taught us about family and what's important. Christchurch is a city of survivors. It's a city of the future. And I'm really, really proud of you all. I'm really proud of my hometown, and I wish you all nothing but the best. So today's episode is a tribute to my hometown. Kia ora Christchurch, kia kaha, and we'll see you soon.